Okay, it's challenge time for arrays. So this is the challenge video for arrays. I'm going to type out what the challenge is now. Okay, so the challenge is to create a program using arrays, and it should sort a list of integers in descending order. Now, descending order is highest value to lowest. So in other words, if the array was 5 elements in length and it had the values in it of 106, 26, 81, 5 and 15, then your program should ultimately have the array sorted so that element position 0 would be 106, position 1 would be 81, position 2 would be 26, 3, 15, and position 4, number 5. So in other words, highest to lowest. Now in terms of the numbers that you're going to be sorting, set up the program so that these numbers are read in from the keyboard. I showed you in the last video how to do that. So the methods you actually want to implement are get integers, print array, and sort integers. Get integers is going to return the array of the entered integers from the keyboard that has been typed in. Print array would print out the contents of the array, and the sort integers method should sort the array and return a new array containing the sorted numbers. So what you'll have to do, apart from figuring out how to actually sort the array, you'll have to figure out how to copy the array elements from the past array and create a new array that you can actually work on and sort, and then you're going to return that new sorted array. So it's time now to pause the video, go away and actually try out this challenge. When you're stuck or when you're finished and you're ready to check my version of the solution, come back and I'll show you how to do it. So pause the video now and I'll see you shortly. Okay, so how did you get on? Did you figure it out? So let's go through and create our solution. So the first thing we want to do is we need to create a private field so that we can actually import some data from the console, the keyboard. So we're going to create our scanner class again, our field. System.in again. And I'm going to actually just start down here, leave that in there so we can refer back to it and make sure we haven't forgotten anything. Create our integer array. We're going to call it myIntegers equals getIntegers. And let's start with, say, 5 numbers. We can always change that later. With 5 numbers that we're going to sort. So what we need to do is create our getIntegers method. You saw that in the last video, but we're going to create that again. So public static int, we want to return the array getIntegers. And int capacity, that's going to be the size of our array. In this case, it's going to be 5. And so we'll define our array. New int capacity. And we'll type in a message, enter. Put our \r there again to go to the new line. Then we're going to create our for loop for I equals 0, I less than array.length, I plus, array I equals scanner dot next int. And lastly, we want to return our array. So that's how get integers. Nothing particularly complex there because you saw that in the previous video. Well, next we'll create our print array. And that's going to be also very simple. It's going to accept an array and just print out the contents. So we're going to type public static void print array int array. And then we're going to put a for loop for int I equals 0, I less than array.length, I plus, and we'll put element contents array I. Pretty simple, as you can see there. Nothing particularly difficult about that at all. So that's the first two methods. And then the third one though was the new one. So this is the sort integers method. It's going to sort the array and return a new array containing the sorted numbers. But we've got to figure out a way how to copy the array elements from the past array into a new array and sort them and then return the new sorted array. So in other words, we need to copy the contents of that array into a new one. We haven't actually seen how to do that yet. So how did you get on with that? Did you have a think about how to do that? So I'm going to come up and show you my version of the code. And what we'll do is we'll put public static and it's going to be an int because ultimately you're going to be returning that array, sort integers. But it's also going to be past the array, and the array is the unsorted numbers from the keyboard, essentially, that have been typed in from the keyboard. So there's a number of ways of actually doing this. So one of the first things we need to do is we're going to put int, create a variable called sorted array. So what we're going to do is we're going to set it up and put equals new int array.length. So we're creating an array that is of exactly the same size as the array that's been passed to us. So at the moment that hasn't got any values in it, so we're just going to use a for loop for int I equals 0, I less than array dot length I plus plus. And then we can just put sorted array I equals array I. And that's it. That's creating a copy of the contents that are in the array that's passed to us into our new array that we've created. So again, the first line creates the array called sorted array of type integer, and we're setting it to the same capacity as the array that's been passed to this method. Then we're using a for loop to go through and retrieve each element out of array I, and we're actually saving the contents of array at element I into our sorted array. So consequently, at the end of that for statement, we've actually got an array that contains the same values as has been passed to us. So the next thing we need to do now is, this is where the complex part comes in, this is sorting the array. So what we need to do is we actually need to create a while loop, and within that we need to create a for loop. And I'm going to tell you why as we go through. So first we're going to create our boolean called flag. We'll set that to true, and our while loop is going to continue processing until flag is actually false. Then we also need a temporary variable, which I'll talk to you about shortly as to why we need that. Let's make a bit more space here for this method. So what we now need to do again is we need to go through the sorted array. We need to figure out a way for this to be automatically updated so that we end up having the highest values at the start of the array right through element by element to the end of the array has got the smallest amount. So let's start off with our while loop. So it's going to be while flag. Now, first thing we're going to do in the while flag is we're going to set it to false. And the reason is we're going to have a for loop, and if the for loop if the for loop hasn't sorted all the numbers, we're going to assign that back to true again so that the actual while method, or the while loop I should say, continues. So by default we're setting it to false, which means if we don't reset flag, the variable, to true, we're going to automatically end the while loop. So next becomes the code we need to check. We need to actually do a for loop. So for int I equals 0, I less than sorted array, because we're dealing with sorted array now, sorted array dot length I plus plus. Next we're going to do a test. We're going to put if sorted array I is less than sorted array I plus 1. But the other thing I should have done here is put a -1. And I'm going to explain that shortly. We're going to type temp equals sorted array. I think it's easier if I type in the code and I'm going to go through and explain it all. So sorted array I equals sorted array I plus 1. And then sorted array I plus 1 equals temp. Equals temp. And then we're going to assign flag to true. Okay, the last thing we're going to do down here at the end of the while loop, we're going to return our sorted array. Okay, that's the code. So let's go through this while loop and then the embedded for loop. So firstly, we've got a while flag. So we're basically going to only continue this loop until a while flag is set to true. So initially, when we first created this method, or we first go into that while loop for the first time, it's set to true. So it's going to execute at least once. Then we immediately set that to false. And the reason is we've got a test in here, and we're only going to try and continue the while loop if we actually assign flag to true. And what we're trying to do here is we're going to go through each element of the entire array each time we go through this pass, one pass at a time, and we're only going to exit the loop if we've actually sorted all the numbers and there's nothing left to sort. So how does this actually work? Well, how it works is firstly, with our for loop, we're starting always at element 0, and we're always going to finish our ending element is always one less than the total length of the array. And the reason is we've got this I plus 1 here. And what we're testing is we're saying if the sorted array at element 0 is less than the sorted array at the next element in number, in this case if we started on 0 it would be element 1, what that means is the number in the next element position is actually higher than that first element. So consequently we need to swap them. So what we then do is we actually store the current value of the sorted array into a temporary variable. It's there just to actually store that number temporarily. We then actually move effectively the element that's in this I+1 position into that area. So we're actually swapping them, and then we actually assign the temporary variable back. So really these three lines of code here, what we're doing is we're taking the entry that is at element position 1 for argument's sake and swapping it with element position 0. And then what we're doing, because we've made a change, what that means is we're not sure that there's not more changes to be made. So we need to use the while loop to go through and test, which ultimately will actually go through this entire for loop again, looking to see whether any numbers at a certain position have got higher numbers in one element above them, if that makes sense. And just to make, so this makes a little bit more sense, let's just presume we've got, say, element 0. We'll say that had the value of 50. Element 1 had the value of 160. Element 2 had the value of 40. Let's just say we had those three elements. So basically we're going through our loop, we're starting on position 0, and we're saying if sorted array I, and I is 0, so we're saying if sorted array I, which is 50, is less than sorted array I+1, which is 160. So in other words, what we're saying there is 50 less than 160? So in that case, that is true. So then what we do is we're actually swapping the values around. So in this case, we're putting temp equals sorted array I. Again, I is 0. Sorted array I equals sorted array I+1. And sorted array I+1 equals temp. So what we're basically doing is we're going 160, 50, like so. So we swap those elements around. We're setting that flag to true so that we know that's going to go through at least one more time. And then it actually goes through the rest of the elements. So the second case, I will be set to 1. So it's going to look at 50. It's going to say, is 50... is that less than 40? Because 40 is going to be element 2, I+1. In that case, that's going to be false. So this code doesn't get executed, and that's because we've got them in the right order already. But because flag has already been set true the first time, it's going to go through and start again. So the next time it goes through, we're assigning flag to false again. And this time, the second time it goes through, it does this test. So it's going to start again at element 0 and say element 0 is 160. Is 160 less than 50? Well, in this case, that's not true anymore. So this code isn't going to be executed. And likewise for the next test, that's also not going to be executed. So flag is going to continue to be false. And we're going to exit out of the while loop at that point and then return the sorted array. So that's how that actually works. That's what that sort is doing, is just going through one element at a time in the array and figuring out what needs to change. So that's basically it. That's our method, our code to actually perform this, get this to work. So what we now need to do is just update our main method above to process this. So what we're going to do is actually go up one higher. So at the moment we've only got the numbers. So we're going to print those out after we've sorted them, because we can already see, we'll be able to see on the screen what we've typed. So we're going to put int sorted equals sort integers my integers, like so. And we're going to put print array sorted. So let's run that and see what it does. So enter 5 values. So let's enter the values. We'll do the values that we had on the screen. 160. Sorry, we'll start. Whoops. I'll actually end that. I'll stop the program and we'll actually run it again. Okay, so I'm going to enter 50, which is what we had initially. 160, 40, and let's say 23, 200. And you can see what's done there. It's actually element 0 has now, the contents is now 200, 160, 50, 40, and 23. So it's actually gone through this loop there multiple times until it had nothing else to change, and it's actually sorted in the right order, highest values to lowest values. So that's what the sort array method, or sort integers method, is actually doing. So one last thing that I'm going to show you, and we're going to be talking more about this in future videos, but the method that I showed you here to create, well actually this line as well, to actually copy an array, that's one way of doing it. There's actually a number of built-in ways to do this sort of thing, to copy methods. And more, as you become more familiar with Java, you'll be wanting to use some of the features that are built into Java, because it just actually saves you a lot of time, less code, and you're actually using code that has been heavily optimized, much faster, and it's just less code to debug. So an alternative method to copy an array, copy the parsed array to the sorted array method, would be to do something like this. I'm going to comment that bit of code out. Certainly optional, but it's just for future reference. So we can put sorted array equals. This time I'm going to use an inbuilt method called a class called arrays, which is built into java.util, as you can see there. Arrays dot, and we can type copy of, and you can see by looking at a lot of these different methods, they're overridden. You can booleans, bytes, characters, doubles, floats. There's lots of them there. We're going to use the first one, copy of, and all we need to do is pass in the array, and then how many characters we want the new array to be. We're just going to put array.length. So that one line there effectively takes a copy of the array with the right length and automatically creates the new array called sorted array for us. So we'll be looking a lot more at, as we go through the course, as I said, about different functions that do things like this that are built into Java to save you a lot of time. Now just to confirm that, 50, 160, 200, 43, 770. And you can see it still works. 770, 200, 160, 50, and 43. So that's the solution to the array challenge. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you in the next video.